Today we will be examining a famous quote by Richard Dawkins. I think if there was an Expendables movie made for atheists and it casted all of the washed-up has-beens of the new atheist movement, Richard Dawkins would certainly be among that cast. I don't think that very many people take him seriously anymore, but still, this quote of his I will examine today is a perfect example of atheists making up a new definition for what they would like to think something is, and not even doing themselves the justice of mentioning what that thing really is according to its historical definition. So here's the quote.
Faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence.
So to start with his first claim, he says that faith is an excuse to evade the need to think. Well, faith is not an action, faith only happens in the mind, and so you could only argue that faith is nothing but thought. Of course, the kind of thought that Dawkins is referring to is his thought. So instead of claiming a superior way of thinking, which would at least be something arguable, Dawkins goes the extra mile into unreasonableness and claims that those with faith are not thinking at all. He also claims that faith is an excuse to not evaluate evidence. Well, that's certainly not the sole purpose of faith, but if it was, I would agree with him a little. Time and time again, both in the Bible and according to the saints, we hear endlessly that faith is merely the belief in something you cannot see. That's it. And just because you believe in something that you do not yet see doesn't mean that you have to avoid looking at evidence for or against that thing. When the Catholic scientist Guglielmo Marconi was hypothesizing about the possibility of the radio did not yet exist. It was only a thought in his mind. He had faith that this invention could one day become a reality, and after he pursued his hypothesis in experimentation, his thoughts became realized, and now the radio exists. We can see it and use it. He believed in something he could not yet see, and that is all that faith is. Faith does not pertain exclusively to a god or to anything supernatural. You can have faith that the sun will rise tomorrow. Now you might say, yes, but I've seen the sun rise before, so believing that it will rise again is a reasonable sort of faith because it's based on evidence. And that is exactly what Christians like David Wood have tried to say. He once disbelieved in God, but after examining some of the best evidence and reasoning for God, having faith in God no longer seemed unreasonable to him. If seeing the sun rise today can give you faith that the sun will rise tomorrow, then hearing the reasoning for God's existence could give you faith that He will come back someday. And this is what divides a great number of atheists. Some atheists are at least smart enough to argue against a few crucial pieces of evidence for God, while most will claim that there is no evidence at all. And they refuse to even peek at it. In fact, a good example of this would be the atheist YouTuber Bionic Dance. Who had this to say about some religious books that I recommended in my previous video.
Read all these books written by people with a vested interest in their religion being true. You'll pardon me if I decide to get a few rather less biased reviews, thank you very much indeed.
How can you claim that any of those books are biased when you haven't read them yet? Also, am I to believe that Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, is not a biased view in any way? If you wanted to understand Christianity, but only read about it through the lens of atheists who despise it, you will never understand Christianity. You eventually have to examine the reasoning of those you disagree with, or else you will never convince those you disagree with. And to examine the last part of Dawkins' quote,
"Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence."
And this is where we arrive at an interesting point of debate. I've had many debates with atheists on the topic of evolution in the past. When I press the question of missing hybrid fossils or a lack of observed psychological evolution in animals, I get a response like this. We cannot see it now because it already happened millions of years ago, but it left behind clues and hints that it happened. And this reasoning is very similar to the reasoning of many Christians. You cannot see God, and the Bible reaffirms this idea that we cannot see God right now, but God has left behind clues in the universe and in our history that hint at His existence. That He was and still is here with us. Everyone has faith in something. Some people have faith in things that serve them in no way. Some people have faith in evil things. Many Christians today even lack authentic faith, but so too do many Christians desire the sort of faith that St. Peter had when he willingly accepted being crucified for his faith. And so to correct what Dawkins said, faith can be a cop-out for some people. Faith can be used to supplant the need to evaluate evidence, but that's not what faith is. Faith is the belief in things that you cannot yet see. And for many people, their faith is not blind, it's based on clues and logically coherent reasoning. Mocking a person for their faith that the Earth is exactly 4.5 billion years old is wrong and totally unconstructive. So too is mocking a person for their faith in God completely useless, and something that continues to drive a wedge between bitter, lonely little atheists and the world of people who find it rather easy to accept that there is a creator of this universe who they would like to meet someday.
And remember, if it can't be in your hand, it's all in your head.
Okay, I guess the sun is just in my head then.
That's nonsense.